Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to paint this Imperial Female Commissar with Fists of Power, kindly sent to me by Wargame Exclusive. So as you can see, the first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, as this will give us a nice, smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. Now the first thing I'm doing is I'm coming in with some Corvus black. I'm going to paint this all over the model. Now I know we've already primed the model black, and to some people it may seem a bit weird to paint back over that black with another black, but Corvus black is a slightly lighter shade than the black I've used to prime the model, and this will allow us to shade the model and add definition to all of this black. So you don't need to be nice and neat at this stage, just make sure you cover all of the model with a layer of Corvus black so we've got a solid coat of Corvus black all over the miniature. And with that Corvus black applied, it's a slightly lighter layer than the primer we'd used before, so now this allows us to shade this and get a lot of the model painted really quickly. So I'm coming in with some known oil, and I'm going to apply this all over the miniature. Now you don't want it to pull too heavily, especially in areas that aren't going to be black later on, but make sure you shade all of the model with some known oil so it sinks into all of the recesses. Added some definition to the black will allow us to paint these large areas of black clothing really quickly on the miniature. And after that known oil's dried, you can see it's added some definition, darkened down areas of the black, so now it's time to start highlighting all of the black details. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm coming in with some Corvus black again. With this I'm going to dry brush it all over the miniature. So this will catch all of the raised areas and curved surfaces, brighten them back up again after the shade's settled, and it will give us a nice base for the highlight we're going to apply in the next step. So just dry brush all over the miniature with some Corvus black. And after that dry brush, you can see how it's settled on all of those raised surfaces, but leaving the shade in all of the recesses. So next we're going to apply another dry brush, and that will be with some Mechanica Standard Grey. For this, I'm going to very lightly dry brush this all over the miniature as well. So this will catch on just the most raised surfaces and highest points, brightening them up, adding some interest and definition to the cloak and all the other black details. And there will be all of the black painted, which is such a large part of this model. And after that dry brush has been applied, you can see it's made all of the black details stand out. So now it's time to start applying some colours to this miniature. So the first colour I'm going to apply is some corn red. I'm going to apply this to the inside of her coat, so obviously be really careful around all the areas we want to keep black, but just apply a couple of layers of corn red to the inside of the coat till we get a nice smooth even base of corn red all over that coat. Be really careful when you get around other details as well. Just make sure you apply a couple of layers of corn red all over the coat until we get a solid base coat all over that inner of the coat. And at this stage I'm also picking out any of the detailing. So there's this little band coming along the bottom here. I'm going to make sure I pick this out with a layer of corn red as well, but being really careful around all of the coat details. I want to stay black. I'm also making sure I pick out the little band on her hat as well. I'm just going to pick this out with some corn red. And with that corn red applied, you can see it's added a pop of colour to the model and really added interest to the inside of that coat. So the next thing I'm going to paint is the little bit of skin on this model. So for this, I'm coming in with some Bugman's Glow. I'm going to apply this to any areas of exposed skin. So there's not a lot on this model where she's wearing a gas mask, but she does have an exposed midriff here, as is very common with a lot of Wargame Exclusive miniatures. I'm going to make sure I pick this out with a couple of layers of Bugman's Glow, as well as a little bit of exposed skin on her arms as well. Being really nice and careful around areas I want to stay black, but picking out these little bits of skin with some Bugman's Glow. And with that Bugman's Glow applied, that's all of the skin picked out on the model. So the next thing I'm going to paint is any of the leather details. So for the leather, I'm coming in with some Rhinox hide. I'm going to pick out all of the things like the belt and any straps and pouches on the model. So obviously be really careful around all the other details on the model. And make sure you apply a couple of layers of Rhinox hide to any of the details that want to be leather. So we get a nice solid dark brown base coat all over these leather details. So as well as the belt, there are things here like this pouch on her leg and a couple of straps as well. So make sure you pick all of these out with a couple of layers of Rhinox hide. And with that Rhinox hide applied, we've picked out all of the leather details on the model. So the next thing I'm going to pick out is her hair. For the hair, I'm coming in with Avalan Sunset. I'm going to very carefully apply a couple of layers of Avalan Sunset to all of the exposed hair sticking out underneath her hat and around her gas mask. Obviously be really careful around all the other colours we've already painted. Make sure you base coat all of the hair with some Avalan Sunset. And with that Avalan Sunset applied, it's really given a pop of colour to the hair. So the next thing I'm going to pick out is her gas mask. So for the gas mask, I'm coming in with some Xandri dust. I'm going to paint this all over the face of the gas mask. Don't worry about if you get this over the eye details or anything like that. Just make sure you coat all of the gas mask with a couple of layers of Xandri dust. After a couple of layers of Xandri dust, see we've picked out the gas mask. So there's only a few more base coats left to apply to the model. And the next colour I'm going to come in with is some Celestra Grey. For this I'm going to pick out the sash here going around her waist and the couple of tassels hanging from her shoulders as well. So once again, be really careful around all the other colours, especially the black. And make sure you pick out all of this sash with a few layers of Celestra Grey. Celestial Grey is a great base colour for things we want to be painted white later. So it will look really great for the sash and these tassels here once we apply some shades and highlights. And with that Celestial Grey applied, there's only a couple of details left to pick out on the model now. So for the first of these, I'll be coming in with some lead belcher. I'm going to pick out any of the details that I want to be silver metallic. So it's going to be things here like the mouth to the gas mask, any of these plates of armour that she's got on her body. I'm going to very carefully pick these out with some lead belcher. So any of these flat metallic plates, make sure you give these a couple of layers of lead belcher to get a solid silver colour all over these details. I'm also going to paint the fingers to her power fists as well. Obviously be really careful around all the other details on the model. Make sure I pick out all of the fingers and other details with a couple of coats of lead belcher. And with that lead belcher applied, the only details left to pick out now are going to be the trinkets and things that we want to be gold. So for these, I'm coming in with some Retributor armour. I'm going to pick out details like the Aquillas and things on her chest and on all of those plates we painted with lead belcher earlier, as well as the edges to these plates as well. There's a raised trim at the side. I'm picking this out with some Retributor armour. Any of the trinkets, so she's got this cross on one side, some medals on the other. Any of the other details on the model that we want to be gold, make sure you base coat all of these with a couple of layers of Retributor armour. Don't forget the Aquila here on her fists of power. Make sure you base coat all of these with some Retributor armour. And with that base coat applied, that is all of the base coats painted on the model. So now the next step is to shade the rest of the miniature. So the first shade I'm coming in with is some Reichland Flesh Shade. I'm going to very carefully apply this over the areas of exposed skin. So use a small brush here and try not to get this over anything that isn't skin. And I'm also catching the hair as well. This will give it a really nice deep colour. And now with some Agrax Earth Shade, I'm going to very carefully shade all over her gas mask, letting this sink into all of the recesses and add some definition. And finally, with some Nuln Oil, I'm going to shade everything else. So it's all of the areas of Retributor armour, Corn Red, Lead Belcher, Celestial Grey, and Rhinox Hide. Everything else we just painted in the last few steps. Make sure you shade all of this with some Nuln Oil. You don't want this to pull too heavily in any of the recesses, but make sure you shade all of these details with some Nuln Oil. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. And after those shades have dried, you can see they've added definition all over the miniature, really added interest to the model. So now it's time to start highlighting. And first of all, with some corn red, I'm going to highlight the inside of her coat. So I'm painting some of this wherever the shade hasn't settled into a recess. So wherever there is some known oil that's gone into a crease, fold or recess, I'm coming in on either side of that and bringing it back up to its brighter colour with a coat of corn red. So I'm applying this to all of the larger, flatter surfaces, but leaving that known oil showing in all of the recesses to keep the definition of the shade. And at this point I'm also carefully painting a little bit of corn red at the tops of the folds on this little seam going at the bottom, so we'll use this to work towards a brighter highlight later on. And with that corn red applied, it's very subtly brightened up some of the areas and kept the shade in all of the recesses. So now with a 50-50 mix of corn red and Mephiston red, I'm going to come in and apply this in the middle of all the areas that we just applied the previous step. So you want to leave some of the corn red showing through. As we focus towards the edges and highest points of all of the creases and folds on the coat, I'm painting some of this mix nice and thinly as we brighten up to our brightest highlights. So be nice and careful, work way around the model, apply a bit of this mix in the middle of all the areas we just applied the previous step. And much like before, applying a little bit of this towards the tips of the folds on the greatcoat as we build up towards that highlight on those highest points. And with that mix applied, it's added another layer of brightness to all of the areas of the coat. So now with some pure Mephiston red, I'm coming in again and applying this within the layer of our previous step. So really focus this towards the edges and highest points of any folds and creases. But just make sure you apply a little bit pure Mephiston red in the middle of all the areas we just applied the previous mix. Keep your paint nice and thin at this stage. It'll allow a little bit of the previous colours to show through. Just apply a little bit of pure Mephiston red in the middle of all the areas we just applied the previous mix. And once again, painting a little bit of this really close to the top now for all of those creases, just to brighten those tips up on the coat. And with the Mephiston red applied, you can see it's really brightened up some of those areas of red on her coat. So that's just one final highlight to apply to all of the red areas. And that's with some Evil Sun Scarlet. Just going to very carefully pick out all of the sharpest points to any of the creases on the coat and apply a really thin edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet on all the sharpest points and most prominent folds. Tracing this along the lines of all the creases and just applying a little bit of Evil Sun Scarlet as an edge highlight on all of the sharpest points. I'm also applying a small spot of this just at the very tips of all of the creases on the back of the coat as well. And with that Evil Sun Scarlet applied, that is all of the red areas on the model highlighted. So next thing I'm going to highlight is the skin. For this, I'm coming in with some Bugman's Glow. But much like with the fabric, I'm going to apply this to all the areas that the shade didn't settle. So wherever there's some shade settled in a recess, coming on either side of that, bringing the skin back up to its brighter colour with a thin layer of Bugman's Glow. You can see the Bugman's Glow's really brightened up those areas of skin, but we've left the Reichland flesh shade showing in all the recesses. So now I'm coming in with a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone. For this, I'm going to apply it in the middle of all the areas we just applied the previous step, focusing it towards the most raised points, highest parts of skin and all the upward facing areas. Just applying a little bit of this mix in the middle of all the areas we just applied the Bugman's Glow. With the mix applied, you can see how it's really brightened up all those raised areas of the skin. So now I'm coming in with some Cadian Flesh Tone. I'm just going to apply this as an edge highlight on the tops of all the sharpest points of the skin. So wherever there's a sharp detail but obvious line, I'm coming in applying a little bit of pure Cadian Flesh Tone as an edge highlight on all these sharpest areas. And with that layer applied, that is all of the skin highlighted on the model. So next thing I'm going to highlight is all the areas of white. So for these, I'm coming in with Celestra Grey again first. And wherever the known oil is settled in a recess, I'm leaving that in all the deepest parts and brightening all the raised surfaces, flat areas, back up to a brighter colour with a layer of Celestra Grey. Obviously working with some pretty small details here, so just take your time, be nice and neat, and brighten up all the areas that the shade didn't settle back up to their original colour with some Celestra Grey. Once the Celestra Grey's been applied, it's brightened up all of those areas. So now with some white scar, I'm just going to come in and edge highlight all of these details. So really focus this onto the sharpest points, most raised details, and the edge of any noticeable detailing. I'm just applying a thin edge highlight of white scar as an edge highlight to all of these details. Be really careful here on the tassels on her shoulder, just catching the very ends of each tassel with a small spot of white scar, just to highlight all of these details. With the white scar applied, you can see it's brightened up that white, really made it stand out against the rest of the black of the model. So next thing I'm going to highlight is her hair. For this, I'm going to use Tau Light Ochre. I'm going to very carefully pick out all of the strands of hair where the shade hasn't settled. So leaving all of that shade in the recesses, I'm picking out all of the sculpted on details of her hair with a thin line of Tau Light Ochre, just to highlight all of those strands of her hair. And with the hair highlighted, the model is really starting to come together now. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is the gas mask. For this, I'm coming in with a 50-50 mix of Xandri Dust and Ushabti Bone first. Much like with previous steps, wherever the shade settled into details on the gas mask, I'm coming on either side, leaving that shade in the recess, but bringing all of the flatter surfaces up to a brighter colour with a little bit of this mix. So really take your time, be nice and careful around all the other details, just apply a bit of this mix to all the flat surfaces of the gas mask. With that applied, you can see how it's really brightened up that gas mask. So now I'm coming in with some pure Ushabti bone. With this, I'm just going to apply an edge highlight to any of the sharp details on the gas mask. So keep these lines nice and small, really controlled, and just apply small edge highlights to any of the sharp raised details on the gas mask. And with that gas mask painted, the next step is I'm going to paint in the lenses to the gas mask. So for this, I'm coming in with some Cantor blue. I'm just going to very carefully apply this into the lenses of the gas mask. Being nice and careful, making sure I don't catch any of the rest of the mask. Just applying this into the eye lenses of her gas mask. And with those eye lenses painted, the model's really starting to come together now. Next I'm going to highlight is all of the leather. So to start off with for highlighting leather, I'm coming in with a 50-50 mix of Rhinox hide and Mournfang brown. And I'm going to apply this to any raised parts to any of the leather details. So keep this nice and thin. And on any of the raised details or areas near the edge of the leather that would get the most use and get the most beaten, I'm just applying small spots of this mix to all of these areas as I build up towards a nice bright worn leather look. So now with some pure Mournfang brown, keeping this nice and thin once again, I'm just going to apply some of this into the middle of all of the areas that I just applied the previous layer, but also focus it more towards the edges and sharp points of any details as well. But just apply a little bit of pure Mournfang brown in the middle of all of the areas that we just applied the previous layer. Now with a 50-50 mix of Mournfang brown and XV88, I'm going to be applying this into the middle of where we just applied the pure Mournfang brown. So really focus this into the centre of all of those areas, parts that will get the most use, and just apply a little bit of this as a scratchy highlight in the middle of all of the areas we've been applying our previous layers. And finally, with some pure XV88, I'm going to apply this as a scratchy highlight near the edges and in the centre of all the areas we've just been applying our previous layers. Keep this nice and small, and apply it in a really scratchy pattern, almost stippling it on with your brush. And this will work with all the previous colours we've been applying and really give the impression of used, worn, beaten up leather in all of these areas. And with all of their leather highlighted, it's really added character to the model. So the final things left to highlight are going to be the metallic details. And for these, I'm coming in with some Stormhost silver first. And I'm going to very carefully apply a small edge highlight to all of the areas that we painted with lead belcher. Let's keep these highlights nice and small. Just pick out the very edges of all of the details we painted with lead belcher. Give them a really thin edge highlight of Stormhost silver to give it the impression of light catching off these sharper surfaces. And with that Stormhost silver applied, it's given the impression of light catching on all of those silver details. So the final thing left to highlight is any of the gold. But for this, I'm coming in with some Liberator gold. I'm just going to very carefully apply this to all of the raised details, sharpest points and highest edges of any of the gold details. once again keeping these highlights really small and just picking out the sharpest points of any of the gold details to give the impression of light catching off the sharp surfaces. And with all the gold details highlighted, that is how to paint the Imperial Female Commissar with Fists of Power model that was kindly sent to me by Wargame Exclusive. So this model makes a great proxy for a Commissar for your Imperial Guard armies, especially if you're playing Deathcore of Krieg because of the gas mask. But please let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of this model or the rest of the Wargame Exclusive line? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting!